Wherever you're sitting right now, there's a sound you've stopped hearing. Underneath the voice in your head, underneath the room itself, a low, steady hum. A fridge in another room. Traffic you tuned out an hour ago. The thin electric breath of the device in your hand. It's been there, in some form, every second of your whole life, so you've never once noticed it. Now try, just for a moment, to subtract it. All of it. Every motor, every wire, every far-off road, gone. What's left is a quiet so deep it would almost feel loud. And that quiet, the one you have to strain to even picture, that was just the world. The one every human who ever lived woke up inside. Except us. So let's do something simple. Let's pick up a light, walk back to before the engines, and just listen to what the world actually sounded like. Not the romantic version. The real one. What you could hear. How far it carried. What it told you. And what, exactly, we handed away the day the hum arrived and never left again. Because here's the strange part. The thing we lost wasn't the quiet. It was something stranger than that. And almost nobody alive has ever noticed it's missing. Start with one fact that's hard to hold in your head. For about 300,000 years, there was no engine. None. Not one continuous mechanical sound anywhere on Earth. Every ancestor you have, all the way back, woke up to a world with a very low floor of sound. And when the floor sits that low, something happens that we can barely picture now. You can hear for a very long way. Not in a poetic sense. In a plain, physical one. With nothing humming underneath the world, the smallest sounds simply travel further before they fade into nothing. A single sound, out in that kind of quiet, carries. A footstep in snow. A voice across a valley. A bird 3 fields over. As far as we can tell, this is the world your ears were actually built for. One acoustic ecologist who spends his life hunting for the planet's last quiet places says that, in true silence, the sounds of the dawn can reach you from as far as 20 miles away. 20 miles. Ask a person today how far they think they can hear, standing out in the country, and most will guess 3 or 4. So sit with that gap for a second. Your hearing used to reach across an entire landscape. Now it reaches across a living room. And it wasn't your ears that shrank. For almost all of human history, that reach was survival. Sound was information. You heard the river long before you ever saw it. The weather announced itself from miles off. And the thing moving out there in the dark, you knew, just from the footfall, whether it walked on 2 legs or 4. Silence was never empty. It was a channel. And it was always on. Mornings, especially, were almost unimaginably alive. Before the engines, first light didn't arrive in silence. It arrived in birds. A dawn chorus so dense it could pull a person up out of sleep. Layers of song stacked on song, every species calling at once, filling that huge, low-floored quiet right to the edges. We've caught fragments of it. Almost no one alive has heard the whole thing. Then we started building villages, and the channel got a centerpiece. A bell. For most of European village life, right up until about the 1860s, the single loudest and most important sound in your whole world was the church bell. It told you the time. It called you to gather. It warned you of fire, of enemies, of a death in the village, ringing out in its own rhythm exactly who had died. One historian who spent years on the French countryside found that villages cared so deeply about their bells that local leaders would sometimes spend more on casting and keeping them than on feeding the poor or running a school. That detail, honestly, stops me every time. A whole town would let almost anything go quiet before it let the bell go quiet. That, of all things, was the village's entire information system. One sound, carrying across the fields, holding the whole place together. And then, in barely a single lifetime, that world ended. Around 200 years ago, the first machines that never switch off started turning. Steam, then engines, then more engines, until there was a thing no human had ever lived inside before. A background drone. A hum underneath everything that doesn't stop for night, or for weather, or for you. The bell didn't fall silent because someone smashed it. It fell silent because, for the very first time, it had to compete. But that's only the surface. Because the strangest thing about the hum isn't that it's loud. It's that you genuinely cannot hear it. You were born inside it, so your brain quietly filed it away as nothing. The same way you stopped hearing the clock on your own wall. It sits in almost every room, every recording, every supposedly silent night. And real silence, the kind every human before you was soaked in daily, is now so rare it's very nearly gone. That same acoustic ecologist believes there may be fewer than a dozen places left in the entire United States, and none at all in Europe, where you can sit for 20 minutes in daylight and not hear one single human-made sound. In a lot of wild places, the average stretch of natural quiet has fallen to under 5 minutes. And the hum we can't even hear is, very quietly, doing something to us. Across Europe, environmental noise is now ranked the second worst environmental cause of disease, behind only air pollution. It's tied to roughly 48,000 new cases of heart disease a year, around 12,000 early deaths, and close to 1 million healthy years of human life lost, every single year. Noise is killing people. And I want to be clear about this. That is not a figure of speech. We just can't hear it happening. And here's where it gets stranger. Because the story was never really that the world got loud. The real story is quieter than that. What we lost wasn't the silence. It was the distance. For 300,000 years, your hearing was a thing that reached outward, across valleys, across miles, and carried the whole world back to you. The hum didn't simply add noise on top of that. It lifted the floor until the floor swallowed almost everything past a few feet. We didn't go deaf. We got walled in. You are standing inside a soft gray wall of sound you can't see and can't switch off, and it is exactly as wide as you can hear, which, now, is barely the width of the room. It's all still out there. You just can't hear it from here. And here's where it stops being about engines and starts being about you. Right now, with 2 ears that work perfectly, you can hear less of the actual world than any human who has ever lived. Not because anything is wrong with you, because of the wall. But here's the part I keep coming back to. That older world, the far one, the 20-mile one, it isn't gone. It isn't in a museum. It's a drive away. Get yourself far enough from the lights and the roads on a still night, and you'll actually feel the floor drop out from under the sound. The wall goes thin, and all at once you can hear for miles. A dog barking somewhere on the far side of a valley. Water moving that you can't see. Wind that arrives in your ears a moment before it ever touches your skin. The exact reach that every single person before you simply had, and never once thought twice about. Most people will spend a whole life inside the room and never once learn the valley was there. You don't have to be one of them. It's all still out there. You just can't hear it from here. We didn't lose the sound. We lost the silence that let us hear it. And that silence is patient. It's waiting a few hours up the road, sitting exactly where it has always been, ready to hand your ears back the entire horizon the moment you go looking for it. Some things were never lost, just unlit. And then the lantern goes out. If you'd like to keep wandering out past the hum with me, the lantern's always here.